All right. And we're live.
Woo!
Welcome back to the best podcast in the world,
Oh, yeah.
according to our mothers.
And our 50-odd viewers every week.
Doing pretty good.
Yeah, we are.
All right. So, Kyle, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the epic historical movie Troy.
Troy.
Bum, bum, bum.
Hector.
Hector! And that is why no one will remember your name.
That is why no one will remember your podcast. Okay. Anyways, moving on.
Oh, God.
Moving on. So, yeah, based on the Homer epic about the Trojan War.
It's called the Iliad, for those of you not in the know.
The Iliad.
The Iliad.
I was not in the know.
It's pretty sick.
I asked Kyle if the same guy wrote this that wrote Braveheart.
Bro, that made me cry.
And you were like, about 2,000 years off.
You took 5 years off my life that day. It was all I could do. I'm a weird guy. I use Snapchat for like texting people because I'm an old man. And I almost actually sent a physical picture of my disappointed face.
Well, we learned. That's why we're here.
Yeah,
we're here to learn.
I'm really teaching Dustin history. What he doesn't know is that all of you know this, and it's just
it's
him.
just him.
It's an intervention. It's just him.
Just me. Okay, so this was released in 2004.
Wow. It's weird that it's that old.
Right. I remember it coming out.
Yeah. Well, I remember like the commercials for it and
Yeah.
being 6 and being like, I'm not gonna be able to watch that movie. That looks like an adult movie.
I watched it as a kid, not when it first came out, but then again, maybe it was close to that time. But I watched it sometime in the 2000s.
Yeah, I think I probably watched it first when I was there. My dad, God rest his soul, was really big on like once we were old enough to process the concepts, he'd let us watch a movie as long as he could watch it with us.
Yeah.
And so I think I watched Troy for the first time probably when I was like 12.
Yeah.
Like old enough to cope with like people dying, but not so
Yeah.
old that I understood like the human element behind it. I was like,
Yeah.
ooh, buff guys with spears, sign me up.
We have the internet now. Everybody's traumatized.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, I get traumatized just logging into Facebook.
Oh man. Okay, so let's something I've kind of wanted to touch on, but we haven't really done in other podcasts. I want to kind of bring into the fold is how did this movie do? How was it received by critics?
Man,
So,
it's almost like our movie guy should have thought of that.
yeah, movie guy. It only took me 6 episodes to get this far. Okay, so when it was released, it was actually considered a flop, but it did gross almost $500 million worldwide.
Okay.
Why it was considered a flop was because the total production cost was $185 million. In 2004, this is one of the most expensive movies ever made.
But you just said it grossed 500.
It grossed $500 million. So typically you'll have to think like whatever the production cost is, you double it
Sure.
once you consider like advertisement and everything like that.
Okay.
And it didn't lose money,
Okay.
but it didn't make nearly as much money as they thought.
It's also fairly star-studded, so I'm sure that gives, because you have to pay those actors so much that your definition of flop would be different than like an independent movie's definition of flop.
I believe I shouldn't say most. A lot of the budget went into making the set.
I believe that. The set's pretty.
A lot of it is legitimate. There's not very little CGI, but there's not a lot of CGI in this.
No, not much. It even looks that way. Like when you watch it, you're like, wow, it's all practical effect. Like,
Right. And also, fun fact, outside the gates of Troy, that set was actually destroyed by a hurricane, and they had to rebuild it.
That would up your budget.
Yeah, so they had to do it twice.
Oof.
Anyways, and looking at the behind the scenes, man, I really wish sometimes they would keep these sets just like to where you can go visit, like just leave them.
That'd be so cool.
I know it'd be so
I'd
awesome.
be so down for that.
I know. I would love to take a trip or across the world and
I would
just
love
go
to
visit.
stand outside the gates of Troy and be like, Dustin, Dustin.
Fight with like rubber swords.
Yeah,
in the sand.
except we're both wheezing after about 4 swings.
But I got sand in my
It's
slipper.
a little dry. Could I get some saline?
All right. So for comparison, our first episode, Gladiator, was produced for $103 million
Okay.
and made $503 million.
Okay.
So
So it's
also,
that extra like 80 or so that's really killing it.
yeah,
Nah, yeah.
and made slightly less than
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah.
Also, this was up against some tough competition. You know what else released the same month in 2004?
Oh, tell me.
Shrek 2.
Oh, bro. Yeah.
Bro.
Obviously, those are the same demographic of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Double feature Troy, Shrek 2.
Oh, yeah.
What a time to be alive.
Fun fact, I think, speaking of like competing movies, I think Wyatt Earp and Tombstone, which we will discuss later in our season, were released within like 3 months of each other, and they're both movies about Wyatt Earp. And Tombstone like curb stomped the movie Wyatt Earp.
I'm not surprised.
Which,
at all.
having watched both of them, I'm not shocked by that. But
no, that's happened a couple times. That'd be an interesting thing to talk about in a future episode. Troy was directed by Wolfgang Petersen, a German-born director. He's most famous for directing Das Boot. But he did German films, but he also came to America and did Hollywood films. He directed The Perfect Storm and Air Force One.
Oh wow.
So
Those
this was
both pretty good,
pretty
like,
big,
intense movies. Like
big budget, large movies.
He has a taste for like drama. I mean, I know that you have your opinions about the clunkiness of this movie, and they're valid, but he does like credit where credit's due. This director seems to have like the knack for like this is how I like draw every drip of dramatic tension out of this movie.
So when this was made, he was kind of at the tail end of his career. He had released multiple box office and critical flops in a row. And shortly after this, he actually retired for a decade in 2006. So he didn't direct anything from 2006 until 2016. He came back and he directed, I think, like one more German. I don't know if it was a German film or if it was just more independent film. And then he passed away shortly afterwards.
Wow. That's fascinating.
So this is towards the end of his career and is definitely like the biggest budget. I think the one that he did in 2006 was the remake of the movie Poseidon.
Oh, okay.
About the cruise ship that capsizes. So I mean, he was a big director at the time. But yeah, this is towards the end of what he was doing. So these massive sets were built in Malta, purposefully oversized and more elegant than the remains of Troy that have been found.
Which I think is fascinating because, like you said, you were not aware that this movie wasn't actually based on anything concrete that had happened. And it does come across, because they've eliminated a lot of the more mythical elements of the Iliad, which I'll talk about later. It does come across as like a gladiator or a Braveheart, like a fantasized version of something that could have possibly happened.
Yeah. So this is the second in our Brad Pitt double feature.
Yep.
So obviously Brad Pitt's a bit of star here.
Oh yeah. I mean, Eric Bana was pretty hot.
Eric Bana was also pretty. He was a pretty big name.
Yeah.
He's the guy who plays Hulk.
Yep.
In which Hulk movie? The bad one.
The worst.
That's one.
He's fine in it, but the movie's bad.
The movie's horrible.
He's great as Hector, though.
He does pretty well. Okay, so I have a hard time. I'd watch a scene and I'd be like, yeah, I like him as Hector, and I watch another scene, I'd be like, he just kind of looks confused.
You know, we discussed the fact that this movie has a director's cut that's been much more well received. Without having watched it, I've watched it once, but I didn't pay attention to the cuts. I feel like he's a character that probably got a little shorted by the director's cut. Because he feels just a little disjointed, you know? Like sometimes it feels like he's had like a mental connection that isn't there. Or he's had an emotional journey that isn't there. And I have a sneaking suspicion that it was probably supposed to be Hector versus Achilles. And Brad Pitt was a bigger star, and Achilles is a bigger hero than Hector or Eric Bana. And when they made the cutting floor decisions, they were like, we need more Brad Pitt and less Eric. And that, I'm guessing that's kind of what happened. Because it does feel like I feel like there was supposed to be a scene there that wasn't there.
Yeah, his character kind of seemed to be lacking a little bit. I did like him. He seemed to be the only one in the movie that I was like, you are the good guy. You didn't do anything wrong here. Everyone else can at least... And I like that. I said that was my biggest complaint about Gladiators, how like holier than thou Russell Crowe's character is. And I love how in this one there's depth to each of the characters, and we'll get into that kind of who's good, who's bad.
And the fact that the guy who's looking at it from as objective and rational of a position as a person can is constantly being dismissed by the people around him. Like that rings very true in crises. Like,
so we have a couple other noticeable names we'll get to real quick to round out our cast. Interesting enough, Brian Cox plays Agamemnon. Yeah, I'm just gonna let you say the names.
Okay.
All right. Also played Argyle Wallace in Braveheart.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he does. Yeah.
And then Brendan Gleeson, who plays his brother, Menelaus, also played Hamish in Braveheart.
Yeah.
So we have two returning actors from Braveheart here. I wrote in here. I do have some problems with this movie. So I wrote in here Rose Byrne. I don't know how you say her name.
Rose Byrne, maybe?
Byrne?
Is it Byrne?
Yep.
Yeah, Byrne.
Byrne. Okay, Rose Byrne. plays Briseis.
Briseis,
Okay.
the temple of Acolyte.
Yeah,
Right?
thank God you can say these names.
Dude, I'm a historian. It's my job. It's Menelaus, by the way, to establish my credibility. I said it correctly. Menelaus.
All right. So I already forgot. You tried to say it again.
Briseis. Brad Pitt's quasi love interest.
This is what I said. A very forced love interest that conveniently arrives and leaves as she's needed.
Correct. And the sad part is she does a really good job.
She does great, and she's a great actress. So she's been in I think she's in Insidious, and then she's in the Neighbors movie with Seth Rogen and Zac Efron.
To preface Dustin's criticisms that I've already heard a little bit, we're not criticizing any of the acting performances in this movie. They all brought the heat. It's director decisions and script writing. It's kind of like Star Wars. We're like,
yep,
it's good, but it could have been really good, and it wasn't.
Yep. So I send Kyle questions for him to select, so we kind of know what we're going to talk about in the movie. And I started writing these out, like, okay, did this really happen? Did this really happen? And then I looked up, I don't remember what I looked up, and it's like, based on the epic, and none of it's true. And I was like, God dang it.
I get an all caps question of, is this movie fake? What are you going to talk about? And I was like, my brother, in Christ, mythology is a part of human history. And he goes, oh, cool. Okay.
All right. I just making sure. Because I thought this was like based on, semi based on true events, and then it's like, none of this has been confirmed.
Not even a little bit.
So anyways, in the story, we are 3,200 years ago.
Yes.
Which, if someone watches this in 2104, it would be 3,300 years ago.
Hey,
crazy.
We got to put this in a time capsule.
Anyways, yes. So we start off
loading.
We start off meeting Achilles.
Oh yeah,
and he is who he is through like 80% of this movie.
He's just an irreverent ass, but he's so good at killing people.
Dude, he is the greatest soldier who ever lived.
And he's like irritatingly practical.
Yeah.
You wanna agree with him because he's right, but you're like, you know what? Yeah, you're kind of a jerk, dude.
So he's very you realize early on that he is chasing an idea. He asks, will our actions echo across the centuries? There's two armies. There's should I just say the Greek army? Is that proper?
So the beginning of the movie is a little confusing. Agamemnon is pursuing you can't call it a civil war, a war of unification among city-states of the Mycenae Greeks, which are like the first rendition of Greek civilization, and that is a historical thing that happened. Not Agamemnon, but there was a Mycenae Greece that was formed of independent like city-states of Greek culture. He is uniting the peninsula, and this is the last army he has to fight to do so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so essentially is that it's not like a civil war, really?
No, it would be like when Texas was briefly an independent country, if like we invaded Texas to make them part of the United States.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So unification of
it's
territories.
It's a unification against their will. Sort
gotcha.
Of. Yeah.
You unite. No. You don't get to say no.
Conquer, unite. All one word.
So essentially, you have these two armies lined up, and they say we can share. We can save some bloodshed. You bring your best soldier. I'll bring my best soldier. They bring out Boadrius,
who's just this hulk of a dude.
Who is the actor who plays him is a guy named Nathan Jones. He's a former wrestler. Yeah. He's like 7 feet, 300 and some pounds.
Big dude.
He's a monster.
He looks like a mauler.
And then he goes, Achilles.
And nobody shows.
And Achilles is asleep in a tent with, is there two women?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Gosh, dang it. To be Brad Pitt.
I know.
Anyways.
And so this kid this messenger kid goes and gets him. And he's like, Achilles, the men need you. Agamemnon needs you to fight the biggest man I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And he gets up and he's like, I wouldn't want to fight him. And Achilles looks at this poor like 12-year-old messenger and he goes, well, that's why no one will remember your name.
Roast the kid. That's why no one will remember your name.
Out of this kid. He just rode probably like 3 miles on a horse to get this guy. He gets roasted. He doesn't know what to do.
He has no idea. He's just a kid.
Achilles throws his armor on, grudgingly like rides out to the army.
And there's a single line that really sets up the relationship between him and Agamemnon so well. He says, imagine a king who fights his own battles. Wouldn't that be a sight?
Oh, yeah.
And goes out there, one spear, takes out the shield. He throws it to the ground. The other spear, he kind of ducks. He does this move. Now, I saw in the behind the scenes, the way that Brad Pitt fights in this movie, he's supposed to be a god among men.
Yeah.
So he fights different from other
He
soldiers.
fights impractically, but because he's so fast and so strong, it's flawless. It's like watching Captain America fight in a Marvel movie. Like no normal human could fight that way.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, nobody
Yeah.
should ever like in like Marvel, nobody should ever block an axe kick with one arm because you're just gonna get your femur broken. But since he's better than others, he can do that. Achilles is the same way. Nobody should ever try to block a spear thrown by a 7-foot man at 10 feet just straight on. But since he's the strongest guy on the field, he can do it no problem.
Yeah. So, anyways, he wins the fight, and
with one stroke.
if you haven't seen the scene, just look it up.
Just on you don't need any context. Just watch him. Just Achilles versus Boagrius.
Yeah,
is what you need to watch.
It's really entertaining. Very good. Okay,
it's also interesting. Before we move on, I know we're trying to streamline these podcasts a little bit for your guys' convenience, but in the Agamemnon Achilles dynamic, Achilles' line is important, but what Agamemnon says before that is, I should have you whipped for insubordination. And Achilles goes, well, then you fight him, and starts to leave. And then another king like a lesser king, talks Achilles into fighting. And that's when he says, imagine a king who fights his own battles. What a sight that would be. So Agamemnon is stupidly antagonizing the whole reason that he's winning these fights.
And he says of all the great warriors loved by the gods, I hate him the most.
Yeah.
I love their
it's such a they have such a like a realistic relationship. Like a megalomaniac king would hate like an arrogant prick who has every right to be an arrogant prick that he has to rely on.
Yeah, I and this carries out throughout the rest of the movie, and it becomes there's multiple scenes that really kind of the background dynamic is their relationship.
Yep.
So so Orlando Bloom wants to be the Orlando Groom.
Oh my god!
To another king's wife. I thought of that while I was watching this, and I was like, I can't wait to drop that line on Kyle.
Dude,
he's getting up and leaving.
Kill me now, please. We switched to Sparta, where Agamemnon's brother Menelaus is king, and Hector, so Eric Bana's character, Hector and Paris, played by Orlando Bloom, are the emissaries from Troy, the princes of Troy, come to make an alliance with Sparta.
Yeah, and
if you have another pun, I will come across this room.
I don't, but I wish I did.
I will come across this room like Achilles.
I really want to call him Orlando Groom for the rest of the movie.
We're not going to do. We're going to call him Paris. So Paris has the hots for Diane Kruger's character, Helen of Troy,
who's also in
right now is Helen of Sparta.
Who's also in Inglourious Bastards, starring Brad Pitt.
He's also in National Treasure, starring Nicolas Cage.
I haven't seen that one.
No, of course you haven't.
No, but I have seen Inglourious Bastards.
And we could go into the diplomatics between Sparta and Troy. They're not super important. What is important is they're making peace, and Paris takes Helen with him because they're having an affair behind Menelaus' back. And he loads her onto the ship in the dead of night. And Hector finds out and is pissed.
Well, no. He doesn't find out. Paris comes up and he's like, I need to show you something.
Paris reveals it.
I need to show you something, brother.
A common theme in Troy is that Paris is a well-intentioned, naive idiot who is clearly the youngest sibling with the badass older brother. And he's not a bad dude. Like, he's really not a bad guy. He has very poor choices. He makes very, very bad in-the-moment choices that he then has to be bailed out for.
He's that little brother that probably should have been smacked around a little more as a child.
But case in point, he doesn't abduct Helen. Helen goes with him.
No.
And he doesn't lie to Hector. He's like, I put us in danger. I need to show you that I made a bad decision in the moment. And
she doesn't she doesn't like her husband.
No, Menelaus is a jackass.
Yeah.
Like, nobody likes him.
Yeah.
And Hector almost gives her back and then realizes that he can't, because if he does, he knows that Paris will be killed by Menelaus, and he starts to turn around for Sparta, rethinks, and sails straight to Troy. It is like, we're going to start a war. We better be in our own city.
It doesn't matter because he's like...
because he knows that Menelaus is the brother of Agamemnon, and he's like, even if I can reason with Menelaus, I can't reason with Agamemnon.
Yeah, he knows that
there's a war coming.
He knows it's too late. There's no turning back at this point. Okay, so essentially, that's exactly what happens.
Yep.
Is the two teams unite. They sail to Troy. We have Achilles, who talks to his goddess mother.
Yeah.
Okay, is she supposed to have some sort of spiritual?
The movie makes it unclear. It's implied in the movie that she's a goddess. In the mythology, she is.
Okay.
And I think that's the one mystical element that the movie kind of decided to keep, was like, we're going to be very unclear. She's maybe like him. Maybe the implication in the movie is that
They
for
never
whatever
said
reason,
it.
these people are just special. And he gets convinced to go to the war by Odysseus, Sean Bean's character, who's clever.
Ned Stark.
Yeah, Ned Stark. Except winter's not coming because it's the Greek peninsula.
Right, it's very hot.
He's training with his cousin Patroclus, who is important later in the movie. They're obviously like brothers. They're very close. And Odysseus is like, basically, if you don't go to this war, no one will remember your name. Like he doesn't say it in so many words, but he uses Achilles' logic against him, which is like, you're all about glory and being remembered, and this will be the biggest war that anybody's ever seen. And when we conquer Troy, he just manipulates him, like in a good-natured, you want to come sort of way, and
he's a diplomat.
But we need you. Screw Agamemnon. This is about Achilles, and Achilles, always happy to stroke Achilles' own ego, is like, all right, whatever, I'll go.
Yeah, his mother says,
you'll die.
Your name will be remembered for centuries, but you won't return home.
Yeah, his mother kind of gives him that choice. Like, you're at a crossroads. You either die. Basically, you either don't come back and are remembered, or you can stay in Greece and fade into obscurity.
Which is important later on when he makes a certain decision.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Achilles and his 50 men outrow everyone else.
Well, I think we should specify, there's a small scene in Troy where they're getting ready. They know the Greeks are coming. King Priam, Hector's dad, is like a practical but slightly aloof and overconfident ruler. Troy's this massive city, huge walls, well-trained army. They make a point that Hector's the best swordsman in the East. Like, Hector, though he does not share Achilles' ego, might share Achilles' skill. Like, he is well known as a swordsman and as a military commander. So Agamemnon, wisely, gathers 50,000 men in 1,000 ships to sail to Greece, or Troy, to sail from Greece to Troy. Achilles decides to take the beach of Troy with his boat of 50 men.
Yep. So like I said, this about right around here is where I found out that Troy was not based on something, because I was like, did Achilles? That was one of the questions I wrote down. Did Achilles really take the beach with 50 men?
If he'd have been real, he probably could have.
Yeah.
They don't say it in the movie, but the Myrmidons, so Achilles' men are known as the Myrmidons. They are in Greek mythology like the Navy SEALs. Like, they're super elite. They have mythical origins themselves. They're not quite Achilles, but it's like the most badass guy leading a regiment of 50 guys that he trained to be as badass as they possibly could. So if anybody's going to take the beach, it is going to be these guys.
Right. Okay. So they do take the beach.
They do.
Successfully.
They use like a shield wall thing, and they just kind of barrel their way, and Achilles just battering rams the Trojan men.
And then they back soldiers, and then also, I guess, priests into the church,
the Temple of Apollo.
This is where we find.
It's important to know that Troy and Greece share gods in this movie. Apollo is important to the Greeks, and his men try to stop him. And after they've slaughtered everybody, and he's like, his lieutenant is like, we shouldn't deface Apollo's temple. Don't we want the gods on our side? He sees everything, and Achilles cuts the head off his statue, and then just is like, take it. It's yours.
He's like, he's black, and to both the Trojans and the Greeks, this is like blasphemous.
No, his men do not like that he did that. Like, they're not thrilled.
So this is where he finds one more time, Briseis. Okay, this is where he finds Briseis. Well, somebody finds Briseis,
and he rescues her from like his own men. More or less.
Hector comes in
with his personal guard.
Yeah, so he's like, we've got you cornered. We can take you out. And it doesn't go very well.
Well, I mean, Achilles hits a guy with a spear like 150 feet away.
Yeah.
On a running horse.
Yeah.
And then slaughters half of Hector's men with his own men in the temple, and lets Hector escape because he's like, again, I can't remember the exact dialogue, but the implication is, when you and I finally fight, I want it to be
I want people to watch
deal.
it. I want more eyes on it.
I want to meet you
this.
on an even field of combat.
I don't want to kill you.
Ambush you in a temple.
Right. And I don't want to kill you when no one's watching, because he's all about the glory of it.
Yeah. Well, it's look upon my face, son of Troy, because the next time you see it, like, yeah.
Okay, so Achilles and Hector, this is when we kind of established they have opposite philosophies.
Yes.
Hector could care less about how he's remembered, what his name means. He is all about the present. He says, basically, like, what's the point if we're in the ground?
Yeah.
And Achilles is the exact opposite.
Well, Hector's mantra is even, love your wife, honor your father, and praise the gods. So he's all about like good acts, good deeds, be a good person, and that's all you need to do.
So the next day, Achilles refuses to fight. He's waiting for Agamemnon to beg him to join.
Because Agamemnon tries to take Briseis away from him.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
I kind of skipped over that.
No,
Yeah.
it's just important.
Well, he does. He does
Yeah,
take her.
Agamemnon takes Briseis away from him because he's the king and he should just
'Cause he
have
can.
anything he wants. And Achilles almost slaughters everybody in Agamemnon's tent.
This is when we start to see like, was there a little fling here? This woman you just met that you have no idea anything about?
Odysseus kind of talks them both down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not yet.
I don't remember.
Anyway.
I don't know. Anyways, point
the
being,
conflict is
next day,
around Briseis. Agamemnon briefly takes Briseis away from Achilles, and he's not having it, so he refuses to fight.
He refuses to fight the next day.
And you can't make him because he'll just kill anybody you send after him.
The two men who really started this, Menelaus and Paris, decide to settle this, quote unquote, like men.
Yes.
And fight in front of the gates of Troy.
Becomes quickly apparent that Paris, though willing, is not a good swordsman.
Paris!
He tries, like, to his credit, he tries, but he's not Hector. That's very clear.
Yeah, and Menelaus is legitimately just having fun with him.
Yeah.
So Paris is there's a point where Paris is just getting wrecked, and Agamemnon just laughing at his brother just beating this kid's butt. And then he crawls to Hector's feet.
And this movie's all about fatal flaws, and Paris's fatal flaw is impulsive decisions that he doesn't think out.
Yeah.
Hector's Achilles is his ego, Agamemnon's is his ego, oddly enough. Menelaus is his anger. Hector's fatal flaw is he loves his brother more than he loves his city.
Yeah.
Even despite what he says, he loves his brother too much for his leadership role. Like a leader has to be aloof, and he can't do it. He can't let his brother get slaughtered.
Yeah.
In the field of battle, so he kills Menelaus and betrays the rules of the duel instead of letting it happen. So Hector abandons his own morals to save his brother.
Why did Paris run back for the sword?
Oh, it's the sword of Troy. It's kind of a throwaway line, but his father tells him, as long as this sword is in Trojan hands, our people have a future. Which is important. King, which is, he gives it to him right before the duel. And it's important because, I mean, you're in a war. You don't know that you're going to win. So in Paris's mind, he's like, oh my God, like not only did I just abandon this duel, I have to go get our people's sword. And that's what I mean about, like, Paris is not a bad guy.
No.
He just is not Hector. Like, he's just the younger sibling who's less skilled and is trying to be his older brother. And he's just not.
Yeah.
So they fight. Hector kills Menelaus. Agamemnon orders the Greek army to charge. They fight under the walls of Troy.
They do, right outside the gates.
Yeah.
So afterwards, Agamemnon sends the men forward, and they get absolutely butchered.
Hector kills this giant Greek leader. His name's Ajax.
Ajax, played by Tyler Mane, who is the actor who plays Michael Myers in the Halloween Rob Zombie 1 and 2 Halloween.
So to show... We have seen Achilles' battle prowess against Boagrius, who is this giant hulking man. Not coincidentally, I'm sure, we see Hector kill this giant hulking man, and he does kill him, but you notice Hector's more like a normal dude. He's an incredibly skilled normal guy, but I mean, he gets a beating by this giant guy before he kills him.
Okay, so essentially they run into the conflict that carries for quite a while in this, and the fact that they cannot get through the gates of Troy.
No.
The
Trojan archers are just annihilating the army from the walls.
And Hector shows that he's a better leader than Agamemnon, because he knows when to stop and fall back.
Yeah.
Take the victory for what it was and leave and not lose men.
Yep. And for those of you who have seen Game of Thrones, and I promise this relates just very quickly, King Robert in the first season says, what's stronger, 5 armies or 1? And he holds up 5 fingers, and then he makes 1 fist.
Right.
And that's what Troy is versus the Greek army. The Greek army is all of these city-states and these peoples that Agamemnon rules through his own power of personality. Troy is one nation with one army, and it becomes very clear that they are way better trained and way better led than the Greek army, because they are outnumbered at least 2, if not 3 to 1, and they just slaughter the Greeks in this fight.
So there's a ambush in the middle of the night. The Trojans kind of launch an attack on the Greeks.
And Hector doesn't want to do it.
He says we shouldn't.
Don't push them. They're close. We almost broke them today, but if you attack them, they'll unify.
Right.
Achilles wasn't here. He noticed. He's like, Achilles wasn't there today. They're not united. We cannot unite them. Like, let's not do it.
But they do it anyways.
But he's not king, so he gets,
Right. And part of it is because of their sign of, he cut the head off the statue of Apollo, and it doesn't work out in their favor. So also, just kind of, it's very straightforward and not a lot of ups and downs to it. The relationship between Briseis and Achilles forms. She holds a knife to his throat, and then they have sex.
It turns out he has some form of morals. Like, you don't really expect that from him, but he saves her. So there's a scene where the Greek leaders are in Agamemnon's tent, and they're like, what the hell was that?
Yep.
And we need Achilles. And Agamemnon says he's just one man, and Odysseus, who is the voice of reason in the Greek army, repeatedly says, Hector is one man. Look at what he did to us today. You just left half of your army below the gates of Troy, which they didn't lose a full half of their army, but the message is that, like, we just got annihilated. We need Achilles. You brought it. I brought him for a reason, you know? And so Achilles gets Briseis back, but he's still not going to fight.
No, he's decided. He's going
to say, he told his men not to fight.
He says, don't fight. And he says, we leave at dawn.
We leave
in the morning. And
the Trojans make their fatal mistake.
So that's when, we're kind of out of order, but you get the idea. So that's when the Greeks attack. And then the next morning, Achilles' cousin, so Patroclus dresses up as Achilles and essentially charges into battle. Meets Hector. He fights him off for a little bit, but
Patroclus can fight. Like, he doesn't hold his own with Achilles when they're training, but he kills several Trojan soldiers like pretty quick. Like, the dude is skilled.
Yeah.
He's just not Hector.
He's not. So Hector kills him, and like everyone's stunned
because they think it's Achilles.
Because they think Achilles was just defeated.
Like Achilles.
Yeah. And then they take off the helmet, and the expression and like how solemn Hector becomes as soon as he finds out what he did. Like, he knows. He's like, I'm dead.
Yeah. And Patroclus he's not a kid, but it's very clear that he's like 17, 18, 19.
Right.
Like, he's not old enough that any of these men think he should be involved if he doesn't have to be.
Right. And Achilles is just like, okay, so he was where he was before. He was ready to leave. And he actually comes out of the tent and he goes, I told you not to go into battle.
Well,
what are you doing?
Guy. Yeah.
Yeah. He says, well, basically we're sailing back, which kind of shows, this is one of my problems with it, is it shows how this woman that he's fallen in love with means so much to him that he's ready to go against his own beliefs so quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, whatever. But,
okay, man.
Okay.
Sure.
So essentially he's ready to turn back, and this is what brings him back.
Yeah.
Patroclus being killed brings him back. So he rides his horse alone to the gates of Troy, and he's ready to fight. He calls out, Hector!
Hector! Well, and Hector knows, like, as soon, like, because Odysseus tells him, he's like, that was his cousin, and Hector's like, well, I'm a dead man.
Exactly. He knows, and he basically tells his wife, if I die, this is where he need to go in case the city ever falls. He knows he's dying.
And he keeps saying if, but he's like, everybody's like, oh yeah, you're dead.
Yeah. So the two prepare for war the following day. They face one-on-one, and Achilles, it's such a good fight scene.
Hector throws down, like, credit where credit's due. Well, what I like is that Hector knows that he can't match Achilles because he's seen Achilles in action, but Achilles takes his helmet off, and so does Hector.
Yeah.
So it's that idea that there's not going to be any, other than what we both bring physically, there's no unfair advantages here.
Okay, so that's actually Brad Pitt and Eric Bana.
Yeah.
This was, I do believe, the last thing that they shot for the movie.
That makes sense, because if one of them gets injured during it, you don't want it to derail the rest of production.
So they had an agreement that for each accidental hit, it'd be $50.
Yeah.
That one would pay the other. Eric owed Brad Pitt no money, and Brad Pitt owed Eric $750.
Right.
So, anyways, this is when they had to rebuild part of the set because of the hurricane destroyed it. So they redid it just for this scene, and it was mapped out, choreographed perfectly. I think this is my favorite scene of the movie, is their fight. I think it is the true climax to the film.
Yes.
But okay. But what Achilles does afterwards is he says, you will have no eyes, no tongue. You will walk around the afterlife
blind, deaf, and dumb, and everyone will say that is Hector, the fool who thought he killed Achilles.
Yeah. So Achilles is mad.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, so after the fight, he ties Hector's body to the end or to his horse.
Yeah.
And rides away, staring the king, his father, in the eyes. He does though.
Yep.
And then he tosses Perseus away. And she's like distraught because that's her cousin. And
important
everything.
note about Hector is he dies on his knees. He fought standing up, but I just think it's again probably not a coincidence that this leader of Troy dies on his knees.
Yeah.
Like he gets knocked down by Achilles and stabbed through the chest.
Yeah. And then anyway, so the king sneaks into the Greek camp, and pleads with Achilles for him to give his son a proper burial. Achilles agrees to give him, I forget how many days.
12 days.
12 days of grief.
It's the similarity. So they share the same gods. They share the same funeral customs. Trojan tradition and Greek tradition, according to the movie, is that you give the dead 12 days of games. So that's Achilles agrees to a ceasefire for 12 days. Agamemnon is mad until Odysseus comes up with an idea of how to use these 12 days.
Right. So they build the Trojan horse.
Yes, they do.
And the Trojan horse looks great.
Yep.
It is practical. They actually built one. It looks fantastic. There's a single shot of they have these logs under the horse.
Yes.
Didn't make a whole lot of sense because there's no logs in front of the horse or behind it.
Right.
Yet you see that it is rolling across them.
I mean, okay, unlikely, sure. But the beautiful thing about making a movie about a myth is you don't have to make it realistic.
It bothers me.
Like they have wheels, right? Like this isn't the Stone Age. Like they're aware of like how things move.
Yeah, but they did. But you can see that the it's not like the logs are not rolling as an axle.
You can
and
briefly
wheel.
tell that they have like little wheels, like modern wheels in the prop that is the Trojan horse. Yeah,
but like I said, there's no logs before it. There's no logs after it. So like in that sense, they would roll it for what, like 15 feet, and then stop, put the logs in front of it, roll it another 15 feet. It just takes forever.
We also have neglected everyone's favorite youngest prince, Paris, because during this little montage, after Hector dies, Paris is seen crying but practicing archery, and it turns out little bro's a crack shot.
Little bro's got something.
Like Robin Hood level crack
Ironic,
shot.
Orlando Bloom is a crack shot with a bow and arrow.
I wonder in what other movie that Orlando Bloom might be a crack shot with a bow and arrow.
Harry Potter.
Filmed at the same time. Wild. Anyway.
Did they not put these two things together?
He's a crack shot, and he also tries to fill Hector's shoes as the practical voice, because the priests in King Priam are like, oh, it's a shrine to Poseidon that they built on their way home. We should take it.
He says,
and that way we'll rob them of our luck. And Paris is like, we should burn it. What are you talking about? And as is the theme for the whole movie, the practical voice gets drowned out. They take the Trojan horse in. We all know what Trojan horse means. Fast forward to night, and here come the Greeks. And
the Greeks are inside the walls of Troy. And they open the gates. They kill the guards quietly. They open the gates.
The whole Greek army runs silently up the beach.
Waiting. Yep. Just waiting to come in. This is probably my least favorite part of the movie.
Really?
This had its flaws.
Okay.
The movie had its flaws up to this point.
Yes.
And then here, it seemed like we have 10 minutes to wrap everything up. Do it fast. And
I have read that this was the part of the movie that time-wise was most butchered in the director's cut versus theatrical cut. So it's very possible that they had a lot more.
It is possible. Just going off the theatrical cut.
Yeah, I mean, we watched the theatrical cut, so that's what we're evaluating.
I was like, man, this just okay. So essentially,
it does feel very rushed.
Okay. So Achilles is he's in the horse?
He is in the horse.
Okay.
He waits, like he slides down slightly after everybody because I think we said this, but just to clarify, he lets Briseis go with King Priam.
We
back
did
to
not
Troy.
say that.
That's an important part.
That is an important part.
When he's negotiating with King Priam, he lets his forced love interest that Dustin does not like go back to the city of her birth. But then when he realizes that the Greeks are about to take the city, it's very clear very quickly that he is only there to go get his girlfriend.
And he ends up killing Greeks in his pursuit of getting to her. like I said, she shows up and leaves whenever it's convenient. So we need her outside of the city of Troy for her to be the love interest, and then we need her inside the city during the climax. And it just drives me nuts.
It's almost like she's a dramatic tool. It's crazy.
It really, yeah.
Before we wrap up the movie completely, we should speak that though it is a rush scene that has its flaws, there are some very, very powerful moments in the fall of Troy. Two come to mind for me. The first is that they're defacing the Trojan palace and they're destroying the statues of the gods. And King Priam of Troy is walking through in absolute disbelief because his city never should have fallen.
Right.
He should never have been that foolish. The actor does a great job of you can see all these realizations in his face.
And no one's killing him.
I have done this. And he draws his sword and he screams at the Greek soldiers, "Have you no honor?" And Agamemnon literally stabs him in the back with a spear.
Yes.
So that's one powerful scene. The second powerful scene is that Glaucon is the second general behind Hector of the Trojan forces. He's a very peripheral character, but the actor brings some powerful moments to it. He's recognizable. He's one of those secondary characters. You don't know his name when you're watching the movie, but you're like, oh, that guy that had that scene. He is in the Trojan barracks with about 20 guys. None of them have armor on. They have all clearly woken up from sleep, and they're probably just whoever was around. He gives a very impassioned speech where he says, "Soldiers of Troy, it has been the honor of my life to serve with you. The ferryman calls for us. He's waiting. I say we make him wait a little longer."
Which is, the ferryman is a part of the belief in Greek afterlife.
Yeah, Charon is this demon in the underworld who serves at Hades, the god of death's beck and call. He ferries souls across the river Styx into the underworld.
And that's why they do the coins on the eyes to pay the ferryman. Yep. Okay.
Which is why Priam, and even in real life, as far as we can tell, they believe this very powerfully. Like, you had to do this to be able to cross, to even get judged. Otherwise, you're just floating. But it's a powerful scene because it shows the pride of this city and the pride of the men who fight for it. And like we've already seen, the Greeks would never have done that for Agamemnon.
No.
But these 30 men, and they fight hard, and they fight to the death in this barracks. And Paris, who has been admittedly a coward the whole movie, stands his ground and sniper shots with a bow and arrow so many Greek soldiers before he is finally pulled away by the general.
Yep.
He's like, "You need to get out of here. Your brother's already dead. Somebody needs to save the rest of this city."
And that's where the sword of Troy.
Yes.
That's where he hands it to him, or does he already have it?
Yeah, I think he already has it. But point being, I think it's very important to acknowledge that in this admittedly messy ending of this movie, there are those two incredibly powerful scenes that sneak up on you.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then Agamemnon goes after, I don't know why her name did not stick in my head. Perseus. So Agamemnon goes after Perseus. She ends up killing him.
Yeah, she has a concealed dagger. She kills him. At the same time, Achilles finally finds her.
He
slaughters the two Greek soldiers.
Kills the guards who are about to kill her. And Paris sees in the distance them in the courtyard.
Yep.
And he fires an arrow and it hits him in his calcaneal tendon.
His Achilles tendon.
Now, yeah, it's known as the Achilles tendon.
Sorry.
No. I'm not saying that. No,
we can back up. What's your dramatic reveal?
No, that's fine.
Okay, fine. Achilles takes the arrow through the tendon and he throws his head back. And you're like, oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, man, this man's been...
It'd be
if it bleeds, we can kill it, sort of deal.
So, anyway, so he's basically... okay, if you cut the Achilles tendon,
right,
which I don't know if it was fully severed, but it doesn't matter.
I don't think it really matters if there's an arrow in it.
One, incredibly painful.
Yes.
Would be, obviously. Yes. Two, is I don't know if it technically is, but it's considered like the strongest tendon in your body.
Oh.
Your calf attaches to it.
Right.
If you don't have that single tendon, then like your whole entire leg is basically useless.
Oh, wow.
You have no way of supporting weight on it. And also your ankle will be like extremely unstable. Right. But point being, so essentially he really shouldn't be able to walk, which he does. Kind of dragged himself.
He's Achilles, though. I mean, you kind of expect that he's gonna take a few shots. He takes like 4 arrows.
I think it's 4 arrows because he gets shot through the chest once and he pulls it out, and then I think it's 3 before he collapses.
Since we already implied Lord of the Rings, that guy goes full Boromir. Like he gets riddled.
Yeah. Well, then we've had a lot of arrows to the chest in these movies that we've watched.
I mean, to be fair, if you're gonna hit somebody with an arrow, like
the easiest spot, probably.
Yeah, I mean, come on now. Yeah.
Anyways, Achilles is dead.
Oh yeah.
Paris escapes.
Agamemnon's dead.
Troy falls.
Oh yeah.
And the Greeks win.
And they burn Achilles' body. And that's the movie.
My biggest question is what did Achilles do that solidifies him in this? Like, what makes his name carry on for centuries from this, other than killing Hector, which I feel like.
Well, I think that it's the fact that Odysseus is the one who tells the story, and it turns out he's the narrator.
Right.
Because Sean Bean has a very recognizable voice. So as soon as you hear Odysseus speak, you're like, oh, that was the guy from the beginning.
Yeah, that's Mr. Bean.
Yeah, so he says that, in something along the lines of like, in my old age, I will be able to say that I walked among these men.
Yeah.
Men like Hector and men like Achilles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he killed Hector in single combat.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, despite what like movies tell you, that's really not a thing that ever happens. Like there's a time period where dueling is a thing, and it didn't never happen, but that's a big deal to go one-on-one with a guy, a legendary warrior, and kill him and prove that you are the best swordsman in the known world.
So my point is, he could have killed Hector, had his revenge, and just left.
Well,
that's
I think
probably
it's
why I hate this love interest so much.
Yeah, that's fair. But martyrism is powerful.
Yes. So, like, if he hadn't died, maybe
we would.
I don't know.
To reference an earlier podcast, we would remember Dr. King's contributions if he had not been assassinated. But would we revere him the way we do if he hadn't have died for the cause?
Yeah.
When you die for something, that's the ultimate.
We are not comparing.
Oh God,
Dr. King
no, not at all.
Achilles.
Not at all. We're just a convenient example of the power of becoming a martyr.
Yes. Okay. Back up real quick.
Okay.
2 things. 1.
Whoop.
Brad Pitt.
That's my backup noise.
Whoop.
Well, I didn't want to beep. I'm not a truck.
Okay. So Brad Pitt sprained his left Achilles tendon while filming.
Coincidence?
Yes.
I think not. Brad Pitt is actually Achilles. Write that down.
I wouldn't be surprised.
The dude doesn't age. Like, have you seen a pic? He looks almost the same.
I saw a GQ interview with him, and he's like, "Yeah, I face cream, face moisturizer, like once in the morning, once in the evening. I'm real big on that." And I was like, "Dude, I need to get some freaking face moisturizer."
I also lift for 6 hours a day and eat a diet prepared by my private dietitian.
Yeah.
And my skin cream costs $5,000.
I wonder how many times he gets his blood checked, and they're like, "Oh, your vitamin D is 3% low. Here you go."
Wow. Hey, did you know your steroid level is somewhere between Dwayne the Rock Johnson and King Kong?
Anyways, point being, we're not trying to be Brad Pitt here. All right, so that's a fun fact. Secondly, maybe my least favorite part of this movie.
Okay.
You gave me peace in a lifetime of war. Possibly the worst final words.
That's rough.
Especially from Achilles.
You know, that one hurts me as bad as an arrow in the Achilles tendon.
Ooh.
And it's sad because Achilles' character and the way he's written is the most consistent part of this movie. And he
probably has the most depth. Like I said, whenever he drags Hector's body, like he fights for himself. But like when he drags Hector's body after he kills him, it's like, oh, you're a bad guy. And then he rushes in to save this woman he loves, and it's like, oh, you're a good guy. And I'm like, I like that he kind of balances between the two.
He's emotionally and mentally, he is a normal man with abnormal physical prowess. They don't try to make him holier than anybody else. He just happens to be good at killing people.
Yeah. So, terrible final words. Gosh, dang it.
It's rough. It just is.
There's a lot of criticism for this, for the directing and the screenwriting. Those 2 things in particular. Brad Pitt has even kind of not talked bad about this movie, but he's just like, I was contractually obligated to do it. He does a great job. No, there's nothing wrong with the performances.
I think it is always something to see when you're watching the movie and you know it's clunky and you know it needs polish and you still get done and you're like, that was pretty good.
It's fine.
And the reason you think it was pretty good is because the actors just brought their A game.
I really think the opening scene, the battle whenever he's pushing the Trojans are outside the gates of Troy and they're pushing the Greeks back. That, and then obviously the Achilles Hector fight.
Oh, that
and even the duel between Paris and Menelaus,
it's powerful.
It's good. It's good. There's a lot of good to this movie.
Hector scratching Achilles' breastplate in their fight is surprisingly powerful because nobody can touch him.
He's so close.
And you're like, whoa.
Yeah. And
even Achilles is like...
Achilles even tells his father he was the greatest warrior I ever fought.
Yeah.
So anyways, anyways, definite flaws to this movie.
Oh, of course.
Great parts to it too. I think, and I was thinking about this because we just did Gladiator, and Gladiator came out 4 years before.
Yes.
If Ridley Scott had directed this, I think we'd be talking about it in a completely different light.
I agree with you. I think it's also, since this movie is based on myth, you'll notice I haven't done a lot of historical interjection like I normally do. Also, we're trying to streamline the podcast a little bit for your guys' convenience. But the movie is vaguely based on the Iliad, which is one of the 2 epic poems by the Greek storyteller Homer. Fun fact: we now think
Simpson.
Not Simpson. Homer the blind dude. We now think that actually, much like the new William Shakespeare theory, Homer was given credit for things that maybe weren't his.
Wait, what? I don't know what Shakespeare theory you're talking about.
There's a controversy. I don't know if it's been solved or not. There's a controversy that maybe William Shakespeare didn't write everything he's been credited for, that he put them on and he performed them. Same thing. We're not sure that Homer actually created these myths, or if he is just the most famous storyteller whose name has survived the 3,000 years down the historical record.
Interesting.
It's based on the Iliad. The Iliad is a mythological tale placed in this period called Mycenae, Greece. The first iteration of Greek culture. It's called that because the capital was in Crete, in the city of Mycenae. It's a real time period. Troy, we're pretty sure, was a real city. We're even fairly confident that there was probably some sort of war between a Mycenaean coalition and a city-state by around Troy. The thing, though, is that none of these people are real at all. So Agamemnon, as far as we can tell, not real. Achilles, not real. Odysseus, not real. Hector, not real. Priam is the only one. There is a potential connection between a rogue warlord leading a city-state in the era of the Hittite Empire, which, just for a brief explanation, think ancient Egypt, but in Turkey.
Remind me who Priam is.
The king of Troy.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
There is a line of thought that it's possible that King Priam was more of like Warlord Priam or Governor Priam.
Okay.
He was kind of an independent city leader, and Troy was just an incredibly powerful city-state.
Right.
That picked the wrong fight, and it's possible that the Greeks sailed over and razed it to the ground.
Okay.
We're not sure.
Yeah.
But the Iliad is fascinating because it is a perfect example of how the ancient Greeks thought the gods interacted among men. So in the Iliad, Paris is Priam's son. He is not banished. He is given to a goat herder because the gods tell Priam to do so. He grows up not knowing that he's royal. He accidentally gets sucked into this pissing contest of who's more beautiful between 3 of the Greek goddesses. One's Athena, one's Aphrodite. I want to say the third one's Hera.
Zeus?
No. Don't quote me on that. He picks the wrong one. He picks Aphrodite because Aphrodite is going to grant him true love.
Right.
Fast forward, he becomes a prince of Troy for a little bit. He and Hector kind of have a rocky relationship. They figure it out because Hector's like the prime son, and Hector in the Iliad is a lot like Hector in the movie. He's like lead by example, dude. Paris goes to Sparta, falls in love. So in the myth, at least it's true love. Like, it's not an affliction. Like, it's true love caused by the goddess Aphrodite.
Okay.
With Helen of Troy.
See, I almost feel like that would have helped explain a little bit.
If you want a better version of the Iliad, watch Troy Fall of a City on Netflix. It's a miniseries. It's like 10 episodes. It's a much more carbon copy of the Iliad. He comes back to Troy, and then Agamemnon and Menelaus follow him. The key part, though, that makes the movie a little clunkier than maybe it could be is that the Greek gods interfere in the Trojan War the whole time. And in the Iliad, it's 10 years long.
Right.
They fight over the same city for 10 years because the gods keep interfering and nobody can win. Achilles in the Iliad is a demigod. He is half god, half man, and his mother, who was a minor goddess, dips him in the river Styx in the underworld, which is that barrier that we mentioned earlier. When that happens, if you survive it, you become immortal, except for there's always one weak spot.
Yep.
Because the gods will never let a human fully be a god unless they choose to. But there's no cheat codes in ancient Greece. So she dips him and she covers his heel, which is kind of funny because the Greeks wore open sandal shoes. So why not pick his armpit?
If you grab, okay, never mind. I get what you're saying.
It's interesting. A short non sequitur in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, the really popular kids books about Greek mythology. The main character, Percy Jackson, undergoes the Achilles treatment, and he chooses the small of his back because it's covered by a breastplate.
Mm-hmm.
His main enemy, Luke Castellan, who also does it, chooses his armpit for the same reason.
Mm.
So they're like, they make fun of Achilles. They're like, why would your mother pick your heel? But anyway, so his heel is his weak spot. The basic premise is correct, but they took 10 years and they condensed it to a couple weeks. And the Iliad is interesting because it takes place in the 9th year or the final year of this 10-year conflict. So a lot of it, you tell the story and you give some context. And so it's cool. I like it because we might do this movie later. It's very similar to the King Arthur movie from 2004, where they tried to make a more realistic version of a mythical tale. Like, if this had happened, this is maybe what it would have been like. But it also turns it into kind of this like very hard to wield like movie, because you're taking 10 years of events and condensing it into a couple days, a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And then you're taking gods and goddesses and magic and immortals and prophets and Amazon warriors and reinforcements and supply lines and arguments a decade old with the Greek leaders, and you're trying to put it into a couple weeks with no supernatural forces.
Yeah, it was definitely, it's condensed, but it's clunky.
I will say
it doesn't flow
Achilles
super
is done well. Hector's done well based off of what I know of the Iliad. Paris is done pretty okay. Paris is a little less savory in the Iliad. Like, he's the bad. Like, it's hard to pick a bad guy. He's the bad guy.
Okay.
Like, he's just weak. Is kind of the implication. I think Troy Fall of a City is a truer tale of the Iliad. So if anybody's interested, I will shamelessly plug that show. It seems way closer. I am by no means like a scholar on the Iliad, but it makes more sense. You watch it and you're like, oh, okay. It's very different, though. Fair warning. They changed a lot in the movie. Odysseus is close. Odysseus is way less willing to be in the war in the Iliad than he is in Troy. To the extent that he tries to fake his own madness by pretending that he got a brain fever, which was just a catch-all term for thousands of years of you had a stroke or an aneurysm or something and it destroyed your brain. And he is plowing his field behind a plow, and he does it for 3 days straight, pretending that he can't hear, he can't notice anything. Agamemnon, being the awful person that he is, determined that he's faking, knowing that he's faking because he knows Odysseus and that he just doesn't want to go, but knowing that he's the best tactician in Greece, and if he has any chance in hell of winning, he needs him and Achilles and Ajax, who's the big guy who Hector kills. He needs the 3 main warlords of Greece. He confiscates Odysseus' newborn son from his wife and puts him in front of the plow. And Odysseus, at the last minute, stops the plow and nearly kills Agamemnon in a fit of rage until his soldiers stop him. But then he's in it because Agamemnon's like, great, you're not crazy. You're part of my army.
Dang it. That's
and in the
cruel.
Iliad, there's this interesting dynamic where Achilles is the sword, Ajax is the shield, and Odysseus is the brain.
Okay.
And when these 3 parts are not in sync, the Greeks can't win. And it is not a coincidence that Hector dies once Achilles comes back.
Right.
Oh, and Achilles is killed outside of Troy in the Iliad. It's just an important thing. He's mocking Paris for being a coward. And so Paris shoots him, and one of the goddesses on the side of Troy, or one of the gods, grabs the arrow and throws it into Achilles' weak spot, and he dies. Well, because when you're in Greek mythology, in like the real quote unquote river Styx treatment, if your weak spot is hit, it's mortal.
Okay.
So it's not like, it doesn't like destroy your shield. It's not like a Halo thing where you get hit with a grenade and then your shield goes away. Like if I pierce, it's only like the size of a thumb.
Yeah.
But if I pierce it, you die.
Okay.
Doesn't matter where it is on your body.
All right. Yeah. So there's just a lot they try to put into this movie. Like I said, there's a few good scenes, and man, there's a lot of filler in here.
And there's
too.
a lot of good acting. Like, we don't want to take away credit from the actors.
Okay. Let's give it a rating.
Okay. You go first.
Me go first?
That's kind of our shtick.
Let's
please don't give this a 7.
You don't want me to give it a 7? I don't care what you
give it, unless it's your real take, but like, you know.
All right. I'm not going to give it a 7. I really I was thinking about this when I was watching. I was like, what would I do with this? I almost want to give it a 7, but I'm sorry. The last, that last bit, as soon as they come out of the Trojan horse, it just goes downhill for me.
I'd agree.
Also, so cool that they built these huge sets, and that the Trojan horse is real, and then they just like show it for like 30 seconds.
There's no lack.
Just a waste.
There's no lack of effort in this movie.
Mhm.
Everything's a lack of execution or organization.
That's
I
what
think
I'm
it's the best way
saying.
you can put it. Like there was no phoning in this movie. Like nobody didn't give it their best try. Like that's evident. It's just that sometimes your best isn't great. Is kind of the vibe you get from like the directing and the screenwriting.
Yeah, no disrespect to Peterson, but I really think I wonder what this would have looked like in the hands of a different director. Yeah, but for that I'm gonna go 6. I'm gonna go 6 out of 10.
Maybe next season we should watch the director's cut and compare.
We could.
That could be interesting.
Yeah. We have a couple. We also talked about going back to Braveheart again. So apparently we're just gonna do season 1, part 2.
Maybe we could do like
just do it all over again.
We could do one episode where instead of like analyzing each movie deeply,
yeah,
it's like 2 or 3 like recaps of a different version.
Yeah,
that could be cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so this one is fun for me because as I had to explain to Dustin, like people don't always realize that myths and folklore and tall tales, they're a part of human history. They aren't in and of themselves historical, but they are a part of how people perceive the world and how they valued things and how they viewed their societies as functioning. So the myth of Achilles and Hector and Priam and Poseidon and Zeus and Aphrodite picking these human champions, and for 10 years, them fighting, is a really important part of how the Greeks viewed themselves and their ancestors, even though it was probably all bogus, like, you know.
Right.
And the idea that this oral tradition has lasted so long and that somebody finally wrote it down after hearing it, because Homer was blind, and the vast majority of people through history have been completely illiterate, which is also hard for people to grasp.
Yeah.
But somebody finally heard the story and thought, we need to write this down. And then the Odyssey, which is the follow-up tale of Odysseus's 10-year sail home to poor Odysseus. He's gone for literally 20 years. It's awful. Anyway, we could do that movie later. It's bad.
I was thinking about that whenever I was watching this. I was like, is this the Odyssey? Is this is this related?
Yeah.
It's funny you said that. Just real quick, I just want to bring up a single point. I thought this was based on at least somewhat historical events. I had no idea it was just a tale until I looked it up.
It's such an earnest portrayal of it. They try to make it look like it.
I wonder how many people have no idea that Troy is completely made up.
That's a good question. Well, if you listen to this podcast, now you know.
Now you know.
And then before I give it a rating, I gotta qualify this because myths are hard, right? Like it's not close to the myth, so do I give it a 3? But then like it's a realistic version of the myth, so do I give it like an 8?
I don't even know. Does this one needed? I don't even know if you could give it a historical rating.
I may give it a historical satisfaction rating instead of like it. You know. Yeah. So a few things. The swords are very, very good. Like that is what Mice and I Greek swords look like. The leaf bladed swords. I can't speak on the armor. The idea that Troy is the lack of conscripts in this is hard. So most of human history, you have an elite corps of soldiers, and then you have men-at-arms or conscripts that you kind of train pretty quickly, and they're cannon fodder. The Greek city-states, by the time of like what we think of as Greece, so like 300, they don't do that as much. But at that time, they probably did. So the idea that Troy, because the Greeks kind of look a little disheveled, like they're kind of mixed and matched. So that's sure. I can't promise on the armor, the helmets, but the general vibe of the Greek army for that time period, the Bronze Age, that's probably what you're getting.
Okay.
Troy being this massive, everybody is fully armored and well-trained city-state, that one's just really hard because like you couldn't really do that. But if the movie was closer to the myth, I'd be fine with it. But because the movie is clearly trying to act like it's realistic, and then you have this legendary city with these 50-foot freaking walls and these men with armor, that one's hard. So I'm going to give it historical satisfaction. I will give Troy a 6. I really like the movie. I just think that like it either needed to be more realistic or more mythological.
Okay.
It's that weird, like, why is Achilles so awesome? Why
is Brad Pitt?
Yeah. Because like if Achilles was just a normal guy who just happened to be a very, very good fighter, and his duel with Hector exposes that he's mortal, like he gets cut really bad or something, I'd be cool with that. Like that would up it. If there was a scene where the gods actually interacted with the Trojan soldiers, or if there was like a little spiel about why Troy is so elite, like mythological, I'd be okay with that. That would build the myth part of it. It's just kind of right in that uncomfy spot where you walk away and you're like, that seemed historical, but also like why? Like what's going on here? So I'm gonna for historical faction, I'll go to 6. For my personal enjoyment of this movie, this is gonna expose me a lot. I love this movie. I know it's clunky. I can, I have discussions with my friends a lot. Dustin, my other friend Samuel. So Samuel, if you're listening to this, you gotta plug in the podcast. They are critical. I call them elitist. They're not. I just enjoy really schlocky movies. Like Highlander's one of my favorites, guys.
Oh yeah.
Shut up.
All right.
Shut up. This is a safe space. This is my mother's home. I'm safe here. And so I give my personal satisfaction 9 out of 10. Like I could watch this movie all the time.
Our highest
I don't even
rating
care.
yet.
I know it's rough. I know it's not great. I objectively know these things, but I turn it on and I see Brad Pitt one shot this giant guy, and my brain goes woof. Like I'm in it.
Nice.
And the director's cut is better. I can't remember specifically, but I do know that like the director's cut is just objectively a better movie.
We'll have to get to it eventually.
So I feel a little more justified because we're gonna pretend like I'm only talking about the director's cut, and I'm not. I'm very much talking about the normal, really rough, like, could have been a lot better movie. 9 out of 10 for my personal enjoyment.
I like to imagine that you on a weekend, you just watch Braveheart, Troy, and Highlander, and you're like, perfect day.
Don't tempt me with a good time. I can only get so excited on this podcast.
All right.
Whew, is it hot in here? No, man, I can't watch all those movies because there can be only one.
Oh, my freaking gosh.
I'm so happy you got that reference, and I'm happy it caused you pain.
I caused pain earlier. That's fair.
So yeah, to recap my babble, 6 out of 10 for historical satisfaction, 9 out of 10 because Kyle's an idiot whose father raised him to like objectively not great movies.
All right.
No shame.
So, well, there's that. There's Troy. We already went over it.
Yeah, we're working on making our conclusion shorter. So let's just go to the movie next week.
What are we doing next week?
We Were Soldiers, right?
We're doing We Were Soldiers, which is a movie I had never heard of until you brought up.
Yeah, it's a Vietnam War movie directed by Mel Gibson, starring Mel Gibson, and it is significant. The reason I picked it is because it is like the only historically accurate movie Mel Gibson's ever made.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do... Well, depending on when we release this, that might be the next one.
It might be Napoleon.
We might have Napoleon.
So
those are our next 2.
It's one of the 2. It just depends on what our schedules are like.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
We're filming this around Thanksgiving week to just clarify for everybody.
Just to clarify,
we're very busy people right now.
We started a podcast, which makes it seem like we don't have things going on, but we really do.
Yeah.
We fit this into a busy schedule.
And we committed to expediting our ending, and we still didn't do it. So we're going to sign off and say, look forward to probably We Were Soldiers, but maybe Napoleon.
One of the 2.
Thank you, guys.
All right. See y'all.
See you next time.